We'd like to thank all the great people that came before us. Ilya Repin,
Vladimir Mayakovsky, Victor Tsoi,
and Martin Engel for providing us the political education.
Whoa, 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 that was all kinds of cringe here.
Love to the Soviet past from the citizens of a country that was fucking ransacked by the Red Plague? Haven't you had enough? Anyways, if someone is giving me such a great game, I wouldn't mind even if they would take their inspiration from Saddam Hussein or the devil himself. And even if I despise most of the mentioned people, I don't think that ZAUM would dedicate their game to them on the most important award of their life just to troll me. Not to mention that the first 3 names on their inspiration list mean to the Western audience as much as gender variability to the Eastern one, so I propose you to hear a small clarification for those names from me. Ilya Repin was the most prominent realist painter in the Russian Empire. Born in Ukraine, enjoyed the society of high rollers in already mentioned empire.
Hey, there's the high roller. Hey, there's the high roller. There's the high roller.
And enjoyed it to an extent that his ass moved to Finland, and after Bolsheviks took over,
Never, ever
turned back. Who cares, here's a few of his paintings so you wouldn't doubt his visual influence on the game. The second name they referred to was of Vladimir Mayakovsky, and I propose to hear out one of his more famous poems. Not sure if I was able to keep the rhyme intact by translation, but hey, have you heard the lyrics of Drake for God's sakes?
Just what I need, that does.
So you like roses? I shed on these. Country needs locomotives, we need steel. Comrade, don't sigh or groan, don't pull the bridle. If the plan is done, say fuck off. If not, go fuck yourself either.
Wow, thank you very much. Wow, it means the world to me, thank you.
As you can see, Mr. Mayakovsky was indeed one peculiar person who wasn't afraid of using such hippity-dippity-dip words like
Bollocks, shit and fuck.
He was a proletarian poet with proletarian lyrics and vulgar proletarian language. He was a visage of what a Soviet citizen should be like. Simple, direct, strong, hard-working, and more or less smart. I wouldn't go deeper into his biography with his childish relationship to Lily Brick or the first in the world rap battle in history featuring him and Yesenin. That would be too long and kind of boring. He's famous for picturing the realities of Soviet Union from a proletarian and some might say realistic perspective. Yet even with his vulgar explicit depiction of it, he was still under strict observation of Glavlit, the Soviet version of Orwell's Ministry of Truth, so objective depiction of aforementioned reality in my opinion is out of table. And now for my favorite part, Victor Tsoi. Where to begin? Me personally, I don't like Tsoi, yet this doesn't undermine the value he has to the post-Soviet people. So just for context, the times in which Victor lived were the times where the Iron Curtain was slowly falling down, allowing the Soviet kids to become Pokemon fans or a part of an organized crime group in the future. This was a great time where people would slit each other's throats for such a luxury like a pair of jeans or an Adidas suit. This is of course a small over-exaggeration for 80s, but hold your horses, we still have 90s where you could literally get killed for it. What a great time to be alive. Anyways, I won't bother you with fairy tales of 90s, I'll bother you with fairy tales of 80s. So the 80s. No gins, music consists of something like this. Or this.
Если часом затону на недельку, до второго я уеду, Комарова.
no cars, no shit, no bitches. And there you are, Victor Tsoi, 25-ish years old, making money over selling Czech gins and bootleg recordings of Western groups, which was the only way to get to hear that music. And of course an illegal one. I'll remind you one more time that even rock music in USSR back then sounded like this. No The Smiths, no Scorpions, no Metallica, nothing. And here you are, young Victor Tsoi, drowning in the tunes of Western music, understanding that only a few years here have heard this at all. A wild west of music where you were given a fucking rocket launcher. And as anyone would, Victor used this rocket launcher pretty hard. He took inspirations from many of his Western rock recordings, put some verses on them which he had written in a drug delirium, and there you have it, the most influential rock figure of the Soviet Union. Here are a few examples of what I mean. And as a dessert for my ears, one shot, one hat. Der Gringe, le grunge, el gringe, whatever you wanna call it.
And Marx and Engels for providing us the political education.
And I want you to really understand why is this so surreal for me. The first man that they named as their inspiration hated commies and refused to come back even with an invitation from the almighty Stalin. The second one was a talented man, yet pretty vulgar and clearly a puppet of the regime. The third one would never survive a free music market, so he used the sorry state of his state, Andrew Tate, Gamergate, Man Getting Laid, to get to the top. And at the top of all of this, they named two ideologists who made the land of the already mentioned people and the land of their own into a very, very sad place. Well, if suffering and genocide would encourage people to make such great games, I kind of don't mind, although it's better for me to shut the fuck up right now. So hopefully we've just dissected the biggest inspirations of ZAUM Studio. Now let's try to inspect the environment in which those people marinated to see if it somehow influenced the environment in the game. Tallinn is an old city with lots of Gothic, Baroque and even Romantic architecture. Yet the generous Soviet apparatus managed to diversify the beautiful Estonian landscapes with the magic of communistic architecture, destroyed some of the old bourgeois ones, which I suppose made wonders for the morals of the indigenous folk. What a great substitute for the old, filthy bourgeois architecture. The expansion of Soviet Russians was so successful that even now 70% of Estonians speak Russian, almost 25% think of Russian as their mother language, but to be honest, they weren't proud of it even before it was mainstream. It meant that most of the Russian and Soviet literature, which was predominantly written in Russian, was consumed by the people of Estonia, so all classics of the cheerful and sanguine Russian literature found place in the hearts of Estonians and was culturally passed down to their kids. Because of everything mentioned, there is no wonders that the same kind of wholesome post-Soviet vibe can be felt in Disco Elysium, those welcoming streets of Revachol. The lovely Khrushchevkas and positive neighbors will make your stay here just magical. And if we'll talk more serious, the ZAUM guys said that for them Revachol is a mix of Paris and Tallinn, eclectic which makes sense only in the world of the game. I ain't an expert in Gothic cathedrals of Paris, but Khrushchevkas and panel blocks are my blood and cum, so the degenerate atmosphere of post-Soviet era have a really stark presence here. And a piece of non-Gregorian has its part here as well. It's really hard to talk about this game and the vibe of it without talking about communism. It is synonymous with the game after all, a direct inspiration if you want. Yet it's not as simple as you might think. You see, there was a beautiful time when games stayed out of politics. Then the Gamergate appeared, made the statement games out of politics completely irrelevant, and gave birth to so much cringe it's hard to wrap my head around it. Each game began to be observed as a political statement. Their narratives began to play with political themes. Racial, gender, social inequality talk found its place here and there, and through such moves, game studios tried to get more of them good boys points, which in its place was strongly encouraged by a very leftist gaming journalism and frowned upon by the right reactionary YouTubers, which gave PR to the games nonetheless. All of it has transformed into a perpetual cycle where through endless critique on both sides, each of the parties radicalized itself to an extent where nobody seems sane in his worldview. Yet in the mentioned games, the political statements are more things to mess around with. They are always on the periphery. Disco Elysium in its turn puts politics on a pedestal. Hell, being communist, capitalist, a fucking Nazi or a bum, I'm sorry, primitive anarchist, is a part of a gameplay itself. Because of the openly political nature of the game, many people with an ego the size of hemorrhoids of an old drug driver's ass would tell you that the message of this game is clear as a day. This game is about communism, capitalism, literature, disco, yada yada yada. Can't say I gravitate to any of those answers. But in contrast with games where politics uses a leverage to get validation, Disco Elysium dives deep into the intricacies of it. It is obviously a game made by communists. Yet the arguments against communism here are sometimes even stronger than the arguments for it, which isn't hard to be against, to be honest. This game shows us the pros and cons of many sides. Hell, even some takes of fucking Measurehead could sound valid. The dialectic in this game done so well that there are groups of people that believe that this game is an open confession of love to communism, and others say that it's a giant trolling of today's leftists, and all of those opinions are boiling at the same time. Such polarity could be achieved only if the topic is shown in many lights, thus making this game a very well written piece of media. But what I love the most about this game is that all of it doesn't fucking matter. If you didn't notice, the world of Disco Elysium is a pretty damn cruel place. There are communists, capitalists, mercs, whores, commoners, all with their stories, beliefs and stories why each of them have those beliefs. Although each of those people are different, in conversation with each of them one can directly or indirectly feel a distinctive spirit, which one Classier precisely put into a very subtle sentence.
Life gets hard, but we go on.
Being raised in a post-Soviet country, this is something that I used to hear since I was little. And this sentence from her struck really damn hard when I heard it for the first time, as if something clicked in my head. The more I've been gathering the information about this game, the more clear it was to me that it was a world that replicated the reality in which I used to live, and most so very, very precise. I didn't know shit about the authors of the game when I played it, but as I found out who they were later, everything landed on its place. Art recreates reality, and the reality of the authors was so alike to the one that once was mine, it was mind-blowing to me. I share a nostalgic sentiment to that reality, but I do understand that that reality has arisen due to many historical mistakes. I despise the authors for their political views and inspirations, and at the same time I'm in love with the product that they have made, cause something that horrifically beautiful could only be made by those who lived through this monstrous eclectic reality themselves. This game just showed me one more time that an artist could take inspiration from any parts and shades of our existence. Even ones as bad as communism. As I have already said, art recreates reality. Yet after that, reality recreates art. Authors, although having biases, made a very healthy self-reflection on their ideas. They show that they are not that stupid to just blindly follow an agenda or a political stream. They have asked many questions and didn't answer them, because they didn't necessarily have the answers in the first place. And even with all of that political mumbo-jumbo, they made the main message of the game into something very beautiful. Life goes hard, but we go on. And let's just appreciate it and move on. Thank you, beautiful people, for spending your never, ever, ever, ever returning time on this video. I don't know. Subscribe. There is more to come. Come, my baby. Come, my baby.